Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and hi. Now Muhammad Abshar bin Asri and Muhammad Azim Ikmal bin Burhan will present our topic, which is radio protection strategies for medical personnel. First I will go to the introduction. Patients, doctors and employees in numerous fields including radiology, interventional cardiology and surgery are concerned about radiation safety. The radiation exposure that medical staff receives through fluoroscopic treatment is the highest. Healthcare workers' cumulative dose exposures to radiation from diagnostic imaging modalities such computed tomography, mammography, and nuclear imaging are just a modest impact. But any radiation exposure has a possible danger for both patients and medical personnel. Radiation protection seeks to prevent the negative consequence of ionizing radiation by reducing unneeded radiation exposure. Ionizing radiation is now a necessary tool in medicine for the diagnosis and treatment of a wide range of illness. The total lifetime doses of radiation that patients and medical professionals receive have changed along with its use. Fluoroscopic imaging, which employs X-rays to produce dynamic and cinematic functional imaging, is the source of the majority of radiation exposure in medical workers is a result of formal radiation protection training. However, implementing radiation safety regulations may be difficult, and many interventionalists don't receive formal training in radiation dose reduction during their residency or fellowship. Low adherence to radiation safety rules is particularly prevalent among doctors or medical personnel who employ fluoroscopic imaging outside of specialized radiology or interventional departments. Orthopedics, urology, interventional cardiology, vascular surgery, and gastroenterology are just a few of the specialties that employ fluoroscopy. Justification, optimization, and dosage limitation are three fundamental tenets of radiation protection. Patients, education of the possible negative effects of radiation exposure is mostly the responsibility of doctors, surgeons, and radiologic staff. The medical community ought to be aware of and supportive of the advantages of exposure. The advantages frequently outweigh the dangers in operations that subject patients to comparatively larger radiation doses, such as interventional vascular procedures. The Federal Code of Radiation, which is ALARA, concept was developed to guarantee that all precautions to decrease radiation exposure have been followed, while recognizing that radiation is a crucial component of patient diagnosis and treatment. Any exposure to radiation will raise the risk of stochastic consequences, especially the likelihood of acquiring cancer after radiation exposure. There is an exact threshold that can be used to predict consequently whether or not malignancy will develop in this effect in a model. Then the alara concept is used by the radiology community to teach protective techniques for these reasons. Now I will go through the function. There are many methods to safeguard medical personnel and patients. It is essential to have a fundamental grasp of the science underlying the radiation's harmful effects, and then the example of the high energy photons from the electromagnetic spectrum that can make up X-rays. From the X-ray, the free radicals, chemically active substances that might indirectly harm the DNA, are created by this ionization. Both medical professionals and patients may be directly exposed to the X-ray beam or may be subjected to dispersed X-rays. The energy deposited in tissue from dispersed X-ray is lower than that from X-ray. The energy deposited in tissues from dispersed X-ray is lower than that from X-rays that come straight from the X-ray source, because scattered X-rays lost some of their energy during the scattering process. There are three ways to express radiation doses. The radiation that is deposited, which is we can know that absorbed dose is expressed as a milligauss, and also the effective dosage is measured as millisieverts. The effective dosage, which is measured in millisieverts, is the total of individual organ equivalent doses administered to the body as a whole. Then, to interpret dosage recommendations, it is essential to comprehend this concept. So, can we see here? This is a figure that shows the ICRP dose recommendations. For comparisons, 20 MSV per year is about equivalent to 2 to 3 computed tomography scans of the abdomen and pelvis, or 7 to 9 years of background radiation. Then a 5-year average of exposure above this level has been linked to a 1 in 1000 lifetime chance of developing deadly cancer. So now we'll go to the next part, which is the issues of concern. So the biological impacts of radiation exposure can be either dose-dependent effect or dose-dependent probabilities. When a certain exposure threshold has been crossed, deterministic effect, also known as dose-dependent effects, start to manifest, and then a stochastic effect is one that has a specified likelihood of occurring but no defined threshold at which it must do so. It is referred to as a dose-dependent probability. And then the radiation-induced thyroiditis, dermatitis, and hair loss are a few examples of deterministic consequences that have been in the domains. And then many years after radiation exposure, a stochastic consequence like the emergence of cancer are revealed. Then we should aware that the deterministic effect are dependent on the total quantity of radiation exposure that have organ tissue received over time, so that the probability of a stochastic effect increases with the amount of X-rays the patient is subjected to. Stochastic effect are affected by lifetime equivalent radiation dosage. For the next part, I will pass to Azim.
For this part is significant of radioprotection strategies for medical personnel. The essential aspect in minimizing exposure are the period of radiation exposure, distance from the radiation source, and physical shielding. There are numerous techniques to reduce the length of exposure. When exposing a patient to radiation, the technician or physician should arrange the necessary pictures ahead of time in order to minimize needless and duplicate exposure. Dosimeters are one of the devices of radioprotection that measure the total amount of radiation emitted. Unfortunately, there is a lack of monitoring. As a result, a lack of trustworthy data in a considerable number of healthcare settings. For the comparison, dosimeter should be worn both outside and within the lid apron, and the data should be examined by the facility's radiation safety department. Raising awareness of the necessity of dosimetry should be a top goal for occupational safety and radiation safety department in healthcare facilities. Physical radiation shielding can be achieved via the use of many types of personal protective equipment, which is known as PPE. A thyroid shield should always be worn with lidded apron, and the patients are additionally safeguarded by personal protective equipment. Needed spectacles should include at least 0.25 mm grid equivalents to protect the eye's lens. It is to minimize radiation exposure to the lens by 90% when used on a regular basis. Aside from using lidded apron correctly, careful storage and testing of the equipment are essential to guaranteeing its efficiency. For the next part is the enhancement can be made for radio protection. The medical community's knowledge of how to safeguard individuals from ionizing radiation evolve in tandem with advance in medical imaging. The first step in improving radiation safety is to educate the hospital employees on radiation best practice. The Radiation Safety Department at its institution is in charge of teaching and implementing protective procedures. The Health and Safety Department of Public Health Department of the hospital and other state health institutions should share this knowledge with the community and make certain safe practice continue. Lastly, the conclusion that we can get from this radio protection strategies is the radiation protection for medical personnel is used to reduce unneeded exposure to employees and the general public and to keep either group from exceeding their regulatory limits on radiation exposure. It is to provide an appropriate level of protection for humans without unduly limiting the beneficial reaction giving rise to radiation exposure. Radiation protection is to prevent the occurrence of harmful deterministic effect and it to reduce the probability of occurrence of stochastic effects, which is cancer and hereditary effects. Exposure to extremely high amounts of radiation can result in several health consequences such as skin burns and acute radiation syndrome. Thank you.